So now that I'm going to be making a lot more Song of Ice and Fire content on this channel, I thought it would be a good time to actually go over what my favorite house is in the entire series, and I figured what better way than to rank all the characters in that house. So even with the inclusion of the new show House of the Dragon, House Stark is still my favorite house in all of A Song of Ice and Fire. I just really do believe the level of complexity and depth that George R. R. Martin gives each and every character of House Stark for the most part is nothing short of miraculous. And even though your favorite character might be ranked a little lower than others and I might put higher on this list, don't take that as I don't like them. I love every character in House Stark, even Rickon, but the time that a character is allocated is a factor in my ranking. So in 8th place, I have Rickon Stark. Now I know a lot of people just don't like this character altogether, they find him really whiny and annoying, and I'm not part of that group. I actually really like Rickon Stark and his characterization that he gets in the first book. I really like the idea of him having the most wolf's blood in the whole family, being the wild child who just hasn't really fully grown up yet. And even though I haven't even got into A Dance with Dragons, I'm pretty well aware that he's on like a far north island called Skagos, I'm pretty sure. And out of all of the characters on this list, and probably in A Song of Ice and Fire in general, this is a character who I really want a POV for. I feel like having another young child as a POV character could actually do a lot for the story, and it can also be a really nice little contrast for Bran. I also really like Shaggy Dog and Rickon's relationship. I think it does a lot for both of their characters. And honestly, I could see this character climbing in the future, but right now we just don't really have much of him in comparison to the other Starks in the family. Now with the number 7 spot, I know this is going to be a really hot take, but I actually have Arya. Now I will say, I like Arya a lot better than Rickon. I mean, she has a lot of chapters and a lot of time in the story. And I really do get a lot of enjoyment from her character. The only reason she's lower on this list is I feel that in comparison to many other characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, and especially many other characters in House Stark, she has a very predictable arc. She's going down a path of revenge, and I'm pretty sure this path is going to end with her realizing that she needs to stop somewhere. And it's not that this is a bad arc, it's actually really well done, and I specifically love the world building that we get with Arya. I know a lot of people really don't like her time in Harrenhal or her time like roaming through the Riverlands. I actually do really enjoy them. I feel like it adds a lot of context to the world and really helps give it a larger scope. And as far as 3/4 of the way through A Feast for Crows, I actually think Arya's time in Braavos has already been the best part of her entire character. One thing that Arya definitely does have going for her though, is I do not believe she has hit the true peak of her character development. Because she's been very isolated from a lot of the other POV characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, she hasn't really had a great chance to get a really good interaction. And I think when she eventually reunites with maybe some of her other family members, maybe reunites with Sansa or Jon, this character is going to spike in quality for me. But just in comparison to the other characters in House Stark, I feel they are far more complex in a lot of different ways. Coming up next in the 6th spot, I have Robb. Robb is one of the most beloved, unfortunate, tragic, and interesting characters in all of A Song of Ice and Fire for me. I honestly feel he would be a lot higher on this list if we were actually inside his own head. But the thing is, I feel the story would not be as strong if we weren't just seeing him through Catelyn's eyes. What makes Robb's story so interesting to me is how what gets him killed is his own honor in a way. Robb is sort of like Ned, where he makes a lot of these critical issues because he just can't get over the hump of what he deems honorable. A great example of this is his very complicated wedding to Jean Westerling. In the TV show, he marries her because he loves her, but in the books he actually marries her because he deflowers her. And by his moral code that Ned passed down to him, when you do this to a woman, you have to marry her. And throughout the first 3 books, Robb constantly puts forward what he deems to be right over his own logical reasoning and the logical reasoning of the people around him, which makes you respect him a lot, but it's also what gets him killed in the end. I think what also adds a lot to this character for me is the way other people talk and think about Robb. Specifically, the way that Jon Snow and Theon think and speak about Robb really adds a whole nother level of complexity to this character, because getting to see his relationships with other people from the story gives you a different dimensional look of Robb Stark. Now in the 5th spot, I actually have Bran. Now a lot of people cannot stand Bran as a character, and while I can kind of see why, I just completely disagree. He is a child, and his chapters are very different and much slower compared to the other chapters in A Song of Ice and Fire, but the thing is, they are far more magical. And don't get me wrong, while the political aspect of A Song of Ice and Fire is phenomenal, what really hooked me as a reader was the magical elements happening behind the scenes. And Bran's arc and journey is so interwoven with the behind-the-scenes magical elements that every time I'm reading a Bran chapter, aside from a few at the start of A Clash of Kings, I'm just always glued to the pages. He's always visiting a new place, he's always interacting with something new that's magical, he's always discovering something new about himself and his powers and the three-eyed crow. And the only thing really keeping him from climbing on my list is the fact that his chapters can sometimes be kind of slow, and I don't know if every single moment in every single chapter is necessary. Sometimes they get a little repetitive. But I still do really love this character and everything that he has to offer the story. In fourth place, I have Sansa Stark. Now, I've seen two different sides of the fandom on this character. Some people really adore Sansa, and some people really hate her. And I really do love Sansa Stark, and I actually think you can make a very strong argument for her being the best written character in all of A Song of Ice and Fire. Sansa's arc is one of learning how to be strong in a very different way than we're used to seeing in most stories. It's this kind of effeminate strength and learning how to play to the strengths and gifts you already have that you just don't really see a lot. And in all honesty, I'm not really sure how George created this character so well, because clearly him and Sansa are very different people. But more than anything, what makes me love this character so much is she kind of goes on this like reverse fairy tale arc. In most fairy tales, you have the girl who's down on her luck and then slowly throughout the story gets everything she ever wanted and dreamed of. And unfortunately for Sansa, her arc kind of goes in reverse of this, where she starts off at the absolute peak of her life where everything's great, she's so happy, and for some reason, because her head's in the clouds, she kind of gives this all up in a way, and then comes to realize that she was giving up the true dream, and now her life really sucks. But in going down the sort of reverse fairy tale arc, she becomes a lot stronger of a person, and watching this political mastermind kind of be morphed, created, and birthed from the ashes has been really entertaining to read. And if you want my personal opinion, I think this is one of the most impressive characters that George has ever done. Now, in third place, even though he is only in one book, I have Eddard Stark, or Ned. Ned's journey of uncovering the true mysteries and schemes of what's going on in King's Landing had to be one of the most interesting and enthralling reads that I have ever experienced. Like Robb, but even to a more degree, there are so many points throughout that first book where Ned starts to win, he's starting to box the Lannisters in, and he throws it all away because he's an honorable person. But what really actually cements Ned as a top 3 Stark for me is, it's not even his own POV chapter, it's the final chapter we see Ned from Arya's POV when he's getting executed. Watching Ned, a character you love, a character whose head you've been a part of more than anyone else throughout the first book, denounce all of his morals and give in to the Lannisters for the sake of protecting his children was one of the most tragic and heartbreaking moments in literature for me. And then you have the infamous moment where Joffrey lobs off his head, and I'll just never get over the Gehennas on George R.R. Martin for doing something so drastic and cruel to a character that everyone loved. Both Ned as a character and Ned's death really set the tone for the rest of the story, and that is more than enough to cement him as a favorite character of mine. Now in second place, I have his wife, Catelyn Stark. Reading Catelyn chapters was so enjoyable because it's like you're getting 2 amazing characters for the price of 1. Not only do you see and get to experience all of Catelyn's amazing development and journey throughout the first 3 books, but you also see Robb's journey through her eyes. And the concept of showing you a king through the eyes of their mother is not only creative, but it's very interesting. While Catelyn Stark is really enjoyable and really beloved, she's a deeply flawed individual who makes a lot of mistakes and doesn't always do the nicest things. And this element of corruption that is kind of always a part of Catelyn and leads her to make some really terrible decisions gives her such a full perspective. Because at many times, while Catelyn is the best advisor that Robb has, she can often be the most illogical as well because she is a mother. And it puts you, the reader, in this really interesting perspective where you objectively understand that Catelyn Stark is making a critical error, but because you know her so well and you feel for her, you understand why she's doing it, and you can't help but feel bad and sometimes root for her. But beyond that, what really soars this character to my number 2 spot is just her coming back as Lady Stoneheart. I have a whole 8-minute video that I made a few months back on why I love Lady Stoneheart so much, but to kind of sum it up rather quickly, I think the inclusion of Lady Stoneheart at the end of A Storm of Swords might just be the best moment I have ever seen. Even though it is a supernatural moment, because of the themes of A Song of Ice and Fire, it grounds the story in such a realistic and tragic way. And in all honesty, if we ever see The Winds of Winter, I can only see Catelyn Stark climbing as a character for me, because she's something special. Now, coming into the number 1 spot, I have Jon Snow, and this character is in my number 1 spot for straight up personal reasons. I relate to Jon in a lot of ways. I think many young men specifically can relate to the idea of someone around Jon's age being very lost and not really knowing his place in the world. And I'm going to be making a full, very long video on this character soon because I love him so much. But Jon's journey of self-discovery and finding out who he is and who he wants to be was something that still profoundly affects me to this day. I also really adore how Jon is a natural leader. And I don't really want to give away too much because, like I said, I'm going to go very in depth in probably my next video on Jon. But Jon's journey beyond the wall, like the time from right at the start of A Storm of Swords to when he becomes the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, is my favorite character arc in all of fiction. It's an arc that is so meticulously and perfectly built up from start to finish, and it is more than enough to keep him at not only my favorite Stark, but my favorite character in all of A Song of Ice and Fire. But yeah, thank you all for watching. Let me know what other kind of A Song of Ice and Fire videos you want to see in the future. I am really passionate about the story, and my passion has recently been relit, and I'm excited. So again, thank you all for watching. Hope you all have an amazing day, and peace.